Hi there, Ginger Roses! Welcome back to the YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be looking at what you learn at every age, from just 10 seconds old all the way up to 75 years old. So in this video, we'll see what you should already know and also, hopefully, what you're going to learn in the future. I'm 25 years old, so if I find there's something on this list that I've not learned before that age, I'm going to be really disappointed with myself. Let's find out. Also, what am I possibly going to learn at 75 years old? I don't know. Before we start, guys, as always, I just want to point this out. Of all of you brilliant people who watch my videos, there's a massive 68.6% of you that are not subscribed. Now, we are so close to that 2 million. I think we're about, at the time of filming this video, we're about 5,000 off. So if you watch my videos and you enjoy them, then please help me get to 2 million. It would be amazing. It means so much to me. Thank you. All right, let's get on with the video. Okay, so the first thing that you learn how to do at just 10 seconds old is breathing. Once the baby takes the first breath, a number of changes occur in the infant's lungs. It's interesting, isn't it? Wonder why when you're born do you decide to breathe? Because nobody's taught you how to do it. I suppose it's just natural. It's like a young wolf or a young lion just like naturally knows how to hunt. I suppose because it just like copies its mum. But you're not even doing that. It's just involuntary, isn't it? Because if the baby doesn't do it, it's going to die. At 2 months old, you learn how to recognize faces. That's true, actually. I suppose you'd start to recognize your mum and your dad. Studies have shown that newborns prefer to look at familiar faces over strangers. Interesting. At 3 months, you learn how to smile. Ah, that's cute, isn't it? Some researchers suggest that these may be early social smiles. Well, there you go. At 4 months old, you learn how to roll. This will begin with babies rocking themselves back and forth. They look like crazy people. They're just like... Oh, take me back to those times of just learning how to do basic human movements. Like breathing and rolling. Rolling around the floor. At 5 months old, you learn how to love your parents. Oh, that's nice. Nope, not learned that yet. Jokes! Love you, mum and dad. If you're watching. A secure attachment bond teaches your baby to trust you. Interesting. So before 5 months old, the babies couldn't care less about their parents. They don't love them. At 7 months old, you learn how to crawl. Before babies can crawl, they have to develop skills like head and arm control. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I suppose before that, you're just learning about your consciousness. Like you're learning that, oh, if I think about moving my arm, I can move my arm. You have to learn how to do all those basic human motor functions. It's crazy because you can't remember that far back. Like, I don't remember being that stupid. At 11 months old, you learn how to say your first words. By around 8 to 12 months old, babies will begin to... I clearly haven't learned how to do this one yet. By around 8 to 12 months old, babies will begin to attach meaning to words. Interesting. So they'll actually not just speak words, but they'll understand what certain words mean. At 1 year old, you start to learn how to walk. A later walker may indicate that the baby is more cautious. Interesting. So if a baby takes longer to learn how to walk, they might be a bit scared, a bit more cautious, which is fair enough. I don't know how old I was when I learned how to walk. 18 maybe? Imagine if you went the whole way through school and you didn't know how to walk. That would just be so embarrassing. At 1.3 years old, you learn how to form short sentences. Early sentences are formed with a subject and at least a verb. What is a verb? Verb's a doing word, isn't it? I don't know. Okay, so that's cool. So you don't just know words, but you know how to sort of string words together and form a small sentence. It's around the intelligence of Henry. At 1.6 years old, you learn how to understand rules. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you know that you can't just have ice cream every night. At this age, rules are designed to keep a child safe. No, you can't play at the top of the stairs. Yes, when your parents start telling you off because you're just curious at that age, aren't you? You're just trying new things, and then your parents say no, and you know what no means, so you know that means you can't do that thing, and your whole world comes crashing down because your life isn't a sandbox like you thought. At 2 years old, you learn how to scribble. Just drawing. These scribbles typically result from broad shoulder movements. Yeah, I mean, I'm still at that stage, to be honest. My art is terrible. At 2.4 years old, you learn your gender. Gender identity typically develops in stages. So I was 2.4 years old when I found out that I was a man. Pretty cool. Didn't know that. Before that, I was like, I don't really know. I suppose you're not even aware of genders, are you? You don't even know what they are. All I knew was my mum had long hair, my dad didn't. At 2.8 years old, you start to learn how to run. They unconsciously strengthen bones and improve coordination. Yeah, it's true. So as you start running, you're putting more stress on your joints and your bones. which strengthens them up. You're not even meaning to. It's great. At 3 years old, you learn how to throw. Babies love to engage in repeated throwing and dropping behaviors. Yeah, I mean, I love that as well. It's great fun. I love throwing things. There you go. Proved it. At 3.1 years old, you learn how to ride a tricycle. Riding a trike requires children to learn how to control their direction. Around 3 years old, this is where my first memories kick in. I feel like this is just like the earliest back I can remember. And in primary school, in reception, I suppose I'm actually 4 at this age, but I remember riding a tricycle and being upset that I couldn't ride a 2-wheeled bike because some of my friends could. Some of the bigger boys could ride the bikes and I couldn't. I needed stabilizers. At 3.7 years old, you learn to identify basic colors. Experts say high contrast colours aid babies' development. Okay, so you learn your yellows, your greens, your blues. I mean, you know what colours are, I don't need to explain to you. At 4 years old, you learn how to swim. At this age, kids can usually learn basic water survival skills. Luckily, I do know how to swim, but there's actually a lot of adults, like a surprising amount of adults that don't know how to swim. They just never learn. I think that's crazy. I suppose it's only if your parents get you into it from a young age. Otherwise, you're not going to learn how to swim. Like, where are you going to learn how to swim? In your bath? Probably not. At 4.2 years old, you learn how to form friendships. Yeah, that's cute. I suppose that's because you start primary school at that age. You're in reception, so you're seeing all these other kids your age, and you're like, will you be my friend? Let's be best friends forever. And the other kid's like, I don't know who you are. Childhood friendships teach sharing and communication skills. Well, there you go. Make sure you stick around to the end, guys, to see what you would learn at 75 years of age. It's pretty cool. Okay, at 4.9 years old, you learn how different shapes look. At this age, babies should be able to identify the majority of basic shapes. Yeah, so you're just learning. You're learning about shapes and colours. Take me back to that time, honestly. At 5 years old, you learn how to play cooperatively. Nope, I don't think I ever learned that. Mine! This is when children start working together towards a common goal. Like, how many crayons can we put up Henry's nose? At 5.4 years old, you learn how to write letters. One of the easiest ways kids learn how to write letters is to begin tracing them. I definitely did not do that at 5.4 years old. That sounds really early. Why would you need to write a letter at 5.5 years old? I think I did do it in primary school, but I was not 5. I think I must have been, I don't know, 8? Something like that. At 6 years old, you learn how to tie your shoelaces. Now that I actually did not learn until I was much later. I think I was might have even been 13. It was really late, really too late. I just used Velcro shoes. Learning to tie shoelaces requires patience and determination. Yes, I didn't have those things. At 6.3 years old, you learn how to play video games. Yes, I think the first ever video game I played was Lego Star Wars on the Xbox 360. I think that was the first one I ever played, and I thought it was the best thing ever because my dad had just got me into the Star Wars films, and I thought, oh my god, now I can play as these characters in a virtual game. This is the best thing ever! Video gaming addiction affects between 1.7% and 10% of Americans. Yeah, I would say I was addicted when I was younger, and I don't regret it. At 6.5 years old, you learn how to count numbers. No, I was definitely younger than 6.5 when I learned how to count. Oh, does it mean adding up numbers rather than just going 1, 2, 3, 4? Maybe it means that. Some scientists believe we're born with an innate sense of numbers. It's just been embedded through years of evolution. At 6.8 years old, we learn how to use scissors. Cutting with scissors is something that may take children a while to learn. Yes, it did. To be honest, I still don't fully understand how they work or how to use them. Because for some reason, when I use them, I'm left-handed. Maybe it's because I'm using right-handed scissors. They just really hurt my hand. All the scissors I use, they just don't work. At 7 years old, you learn how to read basic books. Studies show reading kids as young as 9 months can benefit development. Well, there you go. Clearly, my parents didn't read to me when I was younger. No, they actually did. I do remember bedtime stories with my parents. At 7.2 years old, you learn agility in sports. That's interesting. The focus at this age is about gaining knowledge and awareness of the body. So you're learning about your body and your ability to move in different directions quickly. That's what agility is. And I guess the importance of it in sport. That's an interesting one. I wouldn't have thought that. At 7.4 years old, you learn how to tell the time on a clock. Most children can grasp reading the hour on an analog clock at this stage. Oh my god, honestly, the hours I remember my mum sitting there with me, teaching me how to read a 12-hour clock. We'd have one of those cardboard clocks with the hour hands so you could move yourself, and she'd just test me. She'd just moving them around. She'd go, what time is this? Well, I don't know. It's not a real clock. It's not the actual time. I don't care. The amount of, oh God, hours of tears that was. At 7.7 years old, you learn how to be responsible. No, don't think I did. Don't think I ever learned that one. Social problems arise from a lack of understanding duties and responsibilities. What responsibilities do you have at that age? That's what I'm trying to know. I don't think I did not learn how to be responsible at that age. I didn't have any pets. Well, actually, I did have pets, but I didn't have to feed them. My parents would do that. I didn't have any responsibilities, so I don't know what the hell this video is talking about. but maybe that's the average age. Maybe at 7.7 years old, most people have their own kids at that age. I don't know. They've got to look after them. At 8 years old, you learn how to do basic maths. I never understand this. Basic math. Why do Americans say math and we say maths? Somebody needs to change it. Kids start learning maths the moment they start exploring the world. I was definitely better at maths than I was at English growing up. I was more interested in it as well. That's probably why. At 8.2 years old, you learn the truth about Santa. The truth about Santa. No, I was actually younger than this. I was 7 years old when I found out. There is no such thing as being too old to believe in Santa. Yeah, well, I still believe in him to this day. At 8.3 years old, understanding maps. Learning to read and use a map teaches kids spatial skills. No, I didn't really look at any maps when I was that young, I don't think. I probably did, but wasn't taking anything in. The time I remember looking at maps properly would have been like doing the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award. I was so bad at it, I just let the others in my group deal with that. I remember doing the whole D of E, just following along, just literally following my group and just doing whatever they said. I played no part. I did not help in any way, apart from maybe making them laugh. That was about all I did. At the age of 9 years old, you learn how to manage personal hygiene. Hopefully that's to come for me. I've still not learned that one yet. Good hygiene is critical for preventing the spread of infectious diseases. Yeah, that's why I've got rabies and all these other horrible diseases. At 10 years old, you learn how to debate simple topics. This builds kids' critical thinking, communication, and confidence. What kind of debating do you do at that age? Which computer game is the best? Who's your favourite Marvel character? That's probably what I was talking about. At 10 and a half years old, you learn how to iron your clothes. Oh. Yeah, I mean, I probably did learn how to do it, but I never did it. My mum would be like, this is how I do it for you. And she'd be like, do you want to go? And I'd be like, no. That's fine. Honestly, mum, you continue. It teaches you the importance of maintaining personal appearance. Yeah, no, didn't give a shit about that at 10 and a half years old. At 11 years old, you learn how to fight. Interesting. I've never actually been in a fight, apart from just like fake, well, no, I can't really call them fake fights. Fights with my siblings. Growing up with my sister. She was 3 years younger than me. So yeah, I used to get in fights with her. Never been in an actual fight. Children and adults of all ages benefit from martial arts training. No, I never did any of that. Hey, yeah! At 11.4 years old, you learn what puberty is. It causes physical changes and affects boys and girls differently. No, I didn't hit puberty till I was like quite late, like 13, maybe even 14. And I do remember being quite insecure about it because I remember being in the boys' changing rooms and seeing all the other boys' armpits. They had like hairy armpits. And I was thinking, what the hell, man? I felt like I was like 3 years younger than everyone else. But no, it happens. It just happens a bit later. Hopefully it will still happen for me one day. It hasn't happened yet. I'm still waiting. At 11.8 years old, you learn how to think logically. Do you? It helps children solve problems and make decisions. That's interesting. I guess this is like an average age. So if you're watching and you still can't think logically, hopefully, I'm hoping for you it will come soon, because it hasn't for me yet either, don't worry. At 12 years old, you learn how to develop your identity. Often, a child's sense of identity can be shaped by their experiences. I don't really know what it means by that, develop their identity. I suppose like they're learning who they are as a person. At 12.3 years old, you learn the basics of teamwork. Kids need to learn how to communicate effectively with others for this. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would do maybe in like various tasks in school, but the best example I can think of teamwork is like playing Call of Duty. Just playing with my friends. You pushing through this side, I'll push you around this side with my friend, and we'll f**k them up. That's the best example of teamwork I can come up with. At 12.9 years old, you learn how to handle peer pressure. It helps you make independent choices and resist negative influences. Yeah, this is the thing. I've always been pretty good at this, I'd say. I've never really given in to peer pressure. I've never understood it. Like, if there's something that I don't want to do and I'm like 100% sure is bad and the wrong thing to do, and I've got my friends or whoever it is trying to peer pressure me into doing that, I've never been one to give in to that. And I think that's a good feature of mine. to be honest. At 13 years old, you learn how to understand others' emotions. Now that is a very important one, I think. This helps you develop empathy and improve social skills. Yeah, I think if you can understand other people's emotions, you'll make friends very easily. If you can understand other people's emotions, you know what makes them happy, what makes them laugh, what makes them sad, so you know what not to do. It's a very good skill to have. At 13 and a half years old, you learn how to form deep friendships. You have to practice trust, communication, and empathy for this. Yeah, it's funny, because leading up to this point, at 13 and a half years old, I always tried to have a best friend. Yeah, I didn't get my best friend until I was in secondary school, till I was probably around this age, to be fair. But before that, in primary school, I'd just go up to I remember falling out with one of my friends, or he was my best friend at the time, and then just going up to some random other kid in school going, "Do you want to be my new best friend?" And they'd be like, "Yes, I was looking for a best friend too. Let's join forces and be best friends together." It's just different in primary school, isn't it? At 14 years old, you learn how to cook basic food. Cooking gives children a sense of accomplishment and self-reliance. Yeah, I would say that was about the age, to be fair, that I did start learning how to cook. It was mainly breakfast as well. I love scrambled egg, or just any kind of egg. Learn how to cook that myself. Other than that, yeah, my mum would cook lunch and dinner, which was always great. At 14 and a half years old, you learn abstract maths. Understanding algebra, and especially abstract algebra, can be incredibly challenging. No, I definitely never learned this. Don't get me wrong, they tried to teach it to me, but I never learned it. I just about passed maths. I don't know how. At 14.8 years old, you learn how to admit your mistakes. Children seek guidance from adults when they feel safe admitting mistakes. Yeah, I think that's another really important skill to have, being able to admit your mistakes. At 15 years old, we learn how to use social media. Interesting. Yeah, when did I get my first social media? I must have been... I've watched YouTube for ages, but yeah, I suppose I got Facebook just because of, everyone else had it, and I wanted to give it a go, just to see what it was like. I've got that at 13, 14, I think, when I was allowed, but I didn't really use it. But then Instagram I didn't get till I was 18, 19. It's crazy now that I think about it, because this is my job. At 15.6 years old, you learn basic budgeting skills. Research shows that today's children aren't getting the financial education they need. No, I agree. They don't teach it to you in schools. You know how I learned about basic budgeting skills? GTA. GTA 5. And I learned that probably earlier than when I was 15 years old. Because I worked out in GTA that if I spent all my money that I'd earn on a car, I don't know, the newest fast car, then I wouldn't have any money left over to buy other things that I wanted. That's how I learned. I promise. That is... well, probably part of the reason that I learned how to budget in real life. I just didn't get the money through killing prostitutes and shooting police. At 16 years old, you learn the purpose of goals. It teaches planning, persistence, and the value of effort. Interesting. So you learn how to set your own goals and achieve them. Yeah, you might have learned how to do it. I don't know if you would really do it though. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I would actually. Thinking about it with exams and stuff, I'd be like, right, I've got to do a bit of revision tonight. 5 minutes of revision, then 3 hours of GTA. That was my ratio. At 16.3 years old, you learn how to make love. Ugh. Bit of a cringe way of saying it, isn't it? You learn how to shag, is what it should say. Between ages 16 to 20, half the population lose their virginity. Interesting. That is, yeah. That makes sense. To be honest, I'm surprised it's not more than half. There's probably some that are younger than that, and yeah, some that are older as well. It has to be, isn't it? It's one of those two. I was definitely older. I didn't lose my virginity until actually on my 21st birthday. But it really doesn't matter when. But it's interesting that 16.3 years old is the average. I suppose it makes sense though, because 16 years old is the legal age to have sex in the UK. At 16.8 years old, you learn how to drive. Okay, well that makes sense, because you can't start learning how to drive legally until you're 17, but I suppose you could learn with your parents. They'll probably show you a few things before you turn 17. On average, we each drive about 8,000 miles a year. No, I do more than that. I do closer to 18,000 miles a year. I drive quite a lot. At 17 years old, we learn how to get a job. I got my first job when I was 16. I was a waiter. in a fancy restaurant. 60% of jobs are found through networking, not online. Well, the job I had was right next to where I used to live, and I hated it. It was a good job at the time, but I used to be on £6.50 an hour, and it was just so stressful. But I was there for 3 years, and yeah. It was good while it lasted. It suited what I needed, but looking back, it was just a terrible job. At 18 years old, you learn how to vote. About 66% of eligible voters participated in the 2020 presidential election. Well, there you go. At 19 years old, you learn how to open a bank account. About 76.2% of all accounts are checking and savings accounts. I don't think I opened any bank accounts when I was 19. I think I still just had my bank accounts that my parents opened from when I was much younger. At 20 years old, you learn how to cook for yourself. I'm surprised it's not younger than that, actually, because loads of people go to uni at like 18 years old. If you really want to become a good cook, you have to commit to doing it regularly. Do you cook for yourself every day? I do. At 21 years old, you learn how to live alone. In 2020, 27.6% of occupied US households had one person living alone. Wow, that's actually a large amount. There's quite a few people in the world that live alone then. I wonder how many that is in the UK. At 22 years old, you learn how to manage stress. Nope, don't think I've ever learned how to do that. 37% of US adults report being unable to do anything when they are stressed. I think if you're stressed out with like loads of things, you've just got to try and tick them off one at a time. Try not to look at the big thing all at once and try and just be like, right, one, I've got to do this, and then I've got to do this, and then I've got to do this, rather than just going, ah, and then not doing any of it. At 23 years old, you learn time management. 82% of people don't have a time management system. Yeah, this is quite hard if you never learned a few years ago how to tell the time. At 24 years old, you learn how to balance work and life. Workers who maintain a healthy work-life balance are 21% more productive. Yeah, it's quite hard to do that though, isn't it? Work-life balance, because yeah, depending on what your job is, if you work 5 days a week, I mean, most people work a 9 to 5, don't they? And then they'll have the weekends off. So that is your work-life balance sorted for you there. But if you don't, if you're self-employed or if you're in any other line of work, it can be kind of tricky. Here we go, 25 years old. This is my age. I'm interested to see what this is. You learn how to recognize toxic relationships. 1 in 3 young people will be in a harmful or unhealthy relationship. Yeah, I would say I would be able to recognize a toxic relationship if I saw one. Luckily, I'm not in one, but I can see from some of my friends' relationships that they're not great. At 26 years old, you learn how to build a professional identity. A professional identity plays a big part in developing our personal identity. Interesting. Professional identity. I don't have one of those. I'm like the least professional person ever. At 27 years old, you learn how to deal with taxes. Well, I've actually had to learn how to deal with this earlier than this, because being self-employed, you just have to. You just can't not. The average income tax rate in 2021 was 14.9%. Well, there you go. At 28 years old, you learn how to invest your money. It's interesting, as you get older, you're becoming more adult. These are definitely getting more adult things, aren't they? 61% of American adults invest in the stock market. Wow, I didn't know that. That's a lot of people. At 29 years old, you learn how to do financial planning. 58% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved for retirement. Financial planning, again, I feel like I've learned how to do this through GTA. We're like, right, I'm going to save up my money so that I can buy this cocaine business. And then that's going to bring me more money. Oh, God. No, honestly, though, through just playing, not just GTA, but just computer games where there was like some sort of money involved, that is how I learn. I'm pretty sure. At 30 years old, you learn how to raise a child. Urban parents spend 27% more per child than rural parents. Interesting, I didn't know that. Okay, we're jumping a little bit ahead here. At 35 years old, you learn how to manage a business. Interesting. Small businesses make up for 90% of all global companies. Whoa, that is a lot. I suppose it makes sense though, like all global companies, yeah, most of them are going to be small businesses. There's not going to be like mainly big ones, is it? When you put it like that, wow. At 40 years old, you learn how to become a leader. Interesting. 50% of CEOs struggle with developing the next generation of leaders. I suppose they struggle with it because they don't want anyone to replace them. So it's hard to like think about that for them. I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not 40 years old. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Who's going to take over from JJ Everett Rose when I'm gone? Or is the channel just going to die? No, I'll get someone to take it over. At 65 years old, you learn how to adapt to retirement. Americans live, on average, 20 more years after retiring. Yeah, I suppose once you're retired, you do have to think, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're not working now and you've got money. What are you going to do with your life? Because you still want to have a purpose, so you want to do things. I think I just might not ever retire. I'll just keep making videos forever. At 66 years old, you learn your life purpose. 81% believe there is an ultimate purpose and plan for every person's life. Interesting. Do I feel like I have my purpose? I feel like my purpose is probably this. Like I love making you guys laugh and just making videos. I just find it a lot of fun. It's great. So yeah, I do feel like I have a purpose. At 67.5 years old, I feel like you stop saying a half after like age 10, don't you? But at 67.5 years old, you learn how to let go. Self-care is an important part of learning to let go. Oh, okay, so you learn how to let go of like what? Just things that are bringing you down? Things that are, yeah, I guess so. Things that are making you depressed? I don't know, it's pretty deep that one, isn't it? At 68 years old, you learn how to value time. Valuing time means choosing to spend it wisely. This will help you prioritize your time. Yeah, I suppose because you're thinking at 68 years old, you haven't got amazing amounts of time left. So you're thinking, how am I going to spend all this time I've got left? And you would just do it whenever you wanted, wouldn't you? That's what I would. At 68.5 years old, you learn what truly matters. Oh my God, this is just getting deeper and deeper. It means focusing on relationships, health, and meaningful experiences. Yeah, there you go. That kind of goes hand in hand with the last one. How to value time and what truly matters. Yeah, just spend all your time with your family and doing fun things. That's what I'd do. At 69 years old, you learn how to deal with the slower pace of life. This is taking time to enjoy whatever you're doing. At 69.5 years old, you learn how to adapt to aging. It means embracing changes, staying active, and maintaining health. Yeah, because at that age, I suppose you're declining, aren't you, quite a bit. So you just need to learn how to adapt, and you've got to slow down a bit because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. At 70 years old, you learn how to leave a legacy. People want to leave a legacy because they want to feel that their life mattered. Yeah, well, hopefully by the age of 70, I would have done something that's big, I guess. Like to think. Hi, 70-year-old me. What have you done with your life? At 70.5 years old, you learn how important family is. I'm pretty sure you learned that before that age, but anyway, we'll continue. Family boosts your confidence and provides unconditional love. At 71 years old, you learn how to deal with regret. 44% of women have romantic regrets, while only 19% of men do. Oh God, it's not looking good for men, is it? That kind of just adds up, really. That just makes sense to me. At 72 years old, you learn how to be at peace. Past a certain age, your regrets no longer matter so much. That is good. I mean, you definitely want to be at peace. It would be great if everyone could learn that at an earlier age. Like, I wonder what it is at 72 years old that makes you just learn how to be at peace. But I have heard that when you get into your 70s, that's when you're at your happiest. And I wonder why. I really would love to know the reason for that. Okay, guys, we made it to the last one. And finally, at 75 years old, you learn how to accept death. That's very deep, isn't it? Death is an unavoidable part of the cycle of life, yet many do everything to avoid it. Well, the thing is, they say it's unavoidable, but there's so many videos I'm seeing online at the moment. I don't know how much of this research is true, but they're saying that as we get more and more advanced, they're saying that there might potentially be a way that we can avoid death. Even though that's everything the human race has ever known, there might be a way that we can rejuvenate ourselves so that we don't die. Imagine not ever dying. That'd be sick. Okay, guys. Well, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know in the comments what you learned from this video. I'd love to know. Before you go, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We are so close to 2 million, as I mentioned at the start of the video, and it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe. I'm hoping we're going to hit it this weekend. Take it easy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!